Hello guys, welcome to Education India. This is the first video tutorial on the topic simple interest. The total video series has been divided into two parts. The first part will comprise of some of the basic concepts. In the latter part, we will be having a deep insight on some of the advanced topics with some numericals. So let's first of all analyze what is the basic concept of simple interest. What is interest all about? Now consider that there is a person A which borrows some money from B. Then definitely B will have some intentions to get some extra income from A. That's what we call the term interest. So B will impose some interest on A along with the principal borrowed. We define two terms here. The first term is the interest and the second term is the principal. The interest is the additional money that A needs to pay to B. This is definitely not the part of the money borrowed from B. Now what is principal? Principal is the actual money that was borrowed by A. Let's consider the situation that there is a guy A which borrowed some money, let's say 1000 rupees from B. So at the end of a definite tenure, A needs to return some money to B that consists of the actual money borrowed along with the interest imposed. And definitely this interest has some governing parameters like for how much time the money was taken and at what rate of interest the money was being borrowed. So the total amount that needs to be returned is equal to the principal money borrowed along with the interest. Now let's analyze on what factors does interest depends upon. There are basically three factors. Definitely the principal amount that was borrowed. Now let's analyze the term rate percent per annum. Rate percent is basically the rate at which the interest will be calculated on the principal sum borrowed. Let's just have insight. Rate is the interest that borrower has to pay for every 100 rupees borrowed for each year. Tenure for which the money was borrowed by A from B. Now the next term is simple interest. It is calculated on the basis of basic amount borrowed for the entire period at a particular rate of interest. Now there are two terms. Interest has been classified as simple interest and compound interest. The principal amount in the simple interest remains constant for the upcoming years, whereas the principal amount in the compound interest keeps on modifying itself for the consecutive years. Now the simple interest is basically calculated on the basis of basic amount borrowed. You need to focus on the term basic amount. That means what? The basic amount should remain constant throughout the period. Whereas in compound interest, the interest is calculated on the basis of the principal being modified after each year. Now let's go through an example that will clear the concept. Now first take case that the interest was calculated on simple interest basis. If A borrowed 100 rupees from B at a rate of 10% per annum for 2 years, then after the end of first year, A need to return 100 rupees that the amount borrowed and 10 rupees extra. Now for the next 1 year also, the principal on which the interest will be calculated should remain constant at a rupees 100. So the total amount that A need to return will be 100 principal amount, rupees 10 for the interest at the end of first year, along with rupees 10 for the interest for the second year. So the total amount should be returned is 120 rupees. Whereas if the case is compound interest, at the end of first year the amount returned will be 110, but now for the second year the principal to be calculated in the concept of compound interest will be modified. So now the interest for the second year will be 11 rupees. So the total comprises of 100 rupees principal sum borrowed, 10 rupees interest for the first year and 11 rupees interest for the second year. So the total amount to be returned is 100 plus 10 plus 11. So that's 121. Now you may have noticed that we lost rupees 1 on the compound interest basis. Now this may sound a very easy term that losing a rupee 1 is very easy. It's not a thing to be bothered about. But if the rate is very high, if the principal borrowed is very high and the time is also very high, then this difference will make some sense. Now let's move on. To the next slide. Let's go through the basic formulae of simple interest. The first and the very basic formula is simple interest equals P times R times T upon 100. If we put principal as rupees 100 and if we put time for 1 year, you may notice that simple interest basically depends on R, because 100 and 100, this has nullifying effect, T is 1, so simple interest is basically R. So that's what in the previous slide was told. Rate percent per annum is the interest that borrower has to pay for every 100 rupees borrowed for each year. So the principal is 100 rupees, time was 1 year, so you can have simple interest as rate percent. So this is the way we define rate of interest. Moving on, this is the total amount A that is to be returned. If we try to express the total amount to be returned in terms of principal, we have amount to be returned as principal plus interest. Principal is P and the interest is P into R into T upon 100. We will take P common from both of the terms. We have this corresponding equation. Now let's try to express amount in terms of simple interest. So first of all, we need to express principal in terms of simple interest. So corresponding to the equation number 1, we can write principal as simple interest times 100 upon R times T. Replacing principal with the corresponding equation and adding it to the simple interest and taking out simple interest common, we have this simple equation. These are some of the basic formulas of simple interest. We will go through some of the basic examples. We will try to analyze. Now let's go through some of the basic questions on simple interest. This question has two parts. In the first part, we need to calculate simple interest and amount to be returned on a principal sum borrowed of rupees 68,000 at a rate of 10% per annum for 9 months. In the second part, we also need to calculate simple interest and amount for a same principal amount borrowed of rupees 68,000 at a rate of 10% half year for 9 months. There is a difference between the rate percent. We will show you how difference it will make on simple interest to be returned. Let's go through the solution of the first part. We have the basic equation of simple interest as PRT upon 100 and the amount to be returned in terms of principal as this was shown in the previous slide. So putting the corresponding values, we have principal as 68,000, time as 9 upon 12 year. In the question it was given as 9 month, but the rate has been given in per annum, so we need to convert time in years. So 9 month time is basically 9 upon 12 years. And R equals 10%, we need to calculate simple interest. Just putting the corresponding values in this equation, we will find out that the simple interest to be returned is rupees 5100. So the total amount to be returned is the principal sum 68,000 and the simple interest, that is 5100. So the total amount to be returned is rupees 73,100. Now let's solve part B of the problem. In this part, we need to calculate simple interest and amount with a rate for 10% per half year. Now for this part, what we need to do, we need to convert time 9 months in years, but there is a twist also. As the rate has been given as 10% per half year, so we need to convert the time in terms of 6 months. That is, time T equals 9 upon 12 year is basically 2 times 9 upon 12 half year. So the rate has been given 10% half year. We have the principal amount. We can calculate the simple interest putting in the corresponding equation. The values are as P 68,000, T 10%. Time has been modified to 2 into 9 upon 12. So this whole term represents time in terms of 6 monthly rate and definitely upon 100. So we have simple interest as 10,200. Now you can analyze for the rate 10% per annum with the same parameters. We got simple interest as 5100 and for the rate 10% half yearly we got simple interest as 10,200. Now this makes sense as the rate has been drastically increased. As usual, we will be calculating the amount to be returned with a similar procedure. So the amount to be returned is coming out to be 78,200. So the simple interest and the amount is correspondingly having the values of 10,200 and 78,200. Thank you guys. This was the end of the first video of the topic simple interest. I will be dealing with some of the more topics on simple interest in the next video. Keep tuned to our channel. Kindly like, share and subscribe. Thank you guys.